What do we mean by competitive pressure? And how does competitive pressure align with market evolution? How does it change as a market evolves? To grasp the specifics of competitive pressure, we can imagine that a company is like a goldfish in a bowl. The goldfish finds its food in the water in the bowl, just as a company finds its nourishment in the market. So the goldfish represents the company, and the bowl is the market. When the company is alone, the whole market is available just for itself, and this results in a great deal of freedom to set the price it prefers, because the customers in the market have no alternatives except to avoid buying the product. The goldfish in the bowl has no competitors, so all the food is for him. This means that if it were a company, it would be completely free to set a price for its product, and competitive pressure doesn't exist. There are no competitors. If a new fish enters the bowl, what we can expect to happen is that the two fish won't fight each other, especially if they are of similar size. Instead, they will divide the market. This is the situation of duopoly. In a duopoly, competitive pressure begins to exist, but the actions that companies take are aimed at avoiding direct conflict, because they all know that a clash would lead to negative consequences for both firms, so they prefer to split the market. If more fish or new companies enter the market and the number of firms begin to grow, the amount of food in the bowl remains the same because the size of the bowl doesn't change. The fish starts eyeing each other warily, and this increases the competitive pressure. Competitive pressure means how much attention I need to pay to my competitors' activities. If the amount of food is the same, but the number of fish keeps increasing, I need to be cautious. In order to eat, I must ensure that the other fish don't overeat, or I might even have to defend my share of the food. As the number of fish continues to grow, competitive pressure increases, and so does the need to protect one's market position. This means that companies are no longer as free to set the price as they wish. When they set a price, they must consider the prices that set by competitors, who can always lower their price, thereby putting pressure on the investments made by each organization. One of the conditions under which competitive pressure increases or decreases is the rise in the number of companies, that is, the number of fish in the bowl. This means that if there is a way to block the entry of new fish into the bowl or to prevent new firms from entering an industry, competitive pressure tends to stabilize or even slightly decrease. If companies find their balance, as we will see shortly, this is thanks to the so-called entry barriers. Entry barriers limit competitive pressure because they prevent new firms from entering. This allows the incumbents, that are companies already in the market, to find a balance among themselves. So far, we have assumed that the bowl had a stable size, meaning it couldn't grow, and the amount of food available to the fish was always the same. In other words, that the market wasn't growing and no new customers were entering, meaning no additional product was being demanded. In reality, this is a strong assumption, and it's now time to remove it, because markets do grow. Now, when the bowl can expand, what we expect is that with more food for the fish, competitive pressure decreases. The fish are less concerned about the behavior of the other fish because new food is arriving. But if the market and the bowl continue to expand significantly more than the number of new fish, we might even observe that competitive pressure decreases, although new fish are entering. The idea is that if the market grows, if demand in the market increases, competitive pressure can remain stable or even decrease. One final thing requires a bit of imagination. Let's imagine that the food in the bowl comes from a group of children, and the number of children matches the number of fish. The fish realize that if they can establish a special relationship with one of the children, each fish with one child, they can ensure they get the food that child puts into the bowl because the child will care about feeding the fish they like the most. If this happens, And in the business world, we say that companies cultivate their own group of customers by offering them satisfaction, meaning a product tailored to their needs, then competitive pressure decreases. This is exactly what happens when companies start doing effective marketing, meaning they decide that the entire market is not their battlefield, but they choose to focus on specific segments of the market, targeting only certain customers. They make investments to serve these customers better than their competitors, so that these customers become loyal to the company and are willing to pay slightly higher prices to be more satisfied than if they were bought from different providers or at lower prices each time. This is the secret of marketing, and it shows how companies try to reduce competitive pressure. Companies don't want to operate under competitive pressure because it prevents them from freely setting prices. In fact, competitive pressure pushes price down, reducing units margin, the unit profit that each company can achieve. Therefore, a company would definitely want to limit the number of other firms in the market. This is why, for example, they resort to defending copyrights, applying for patents, controlling distribution channels, or finding ways to limit market entry. In other words, companies try to erect barriers to entry. Entry barriers are tools used to reduce companies' pressure. A typical barrier to entry might be the capital requirements or access to a distribution channel and a group of customers. It could also be the economies of scale needed or the expertise required to enter a specific market. For instance, think about what it means today to enter the generative AI market. Very few companies can enter it because it requires investments that are billions of dollars. Or consider launching a platform to compete against Spotify. Even in that case, you would need billions of dollars investment and a lot of time to build a customer base and algorithms that can properly satisfy users better than the Spotify's algorithms. These are barriers created by the need for capital, for knowledge and for expertise in the market. Without access to distribution channel, you can't expect to reach customers in a given market. This also happens when Coca-Cola, several years ago, forced the small grocery stores not to stock Pepsi on their shelves. Another example of barrier to entry is switching costs. These are peculiar types of barriers because they don't prevent companies from entering the market, but they just limit the freedom of consumers to switch suppliers. A typical switching cost is the fee charged by banks to close a bank account or the penalty for breaking a contract. These are monetary switching costs, which are easy to assess and bypass. However, there are other switching costs that are harder to quantify, such as the effort required to learn a new product or a new system. Think, for instance, of learning a new operating system and the need to familiarize yourself with you. And also think of the battle Apple fought against the standardization of accessories for digital devices. If I can use the same charger on both iPhones and Samsung devices, it's easier for me to decide to switch from iPhone to Galaxy or vice versa. Another barrier that restricts a customer's willingness to switch is loyalty. Some consumers remain loyal to a brand because they are happier or more satisfied with it. This idea of satisfaction is crucial because it explains the effort made in marketing to create satisfaction, ensuring that if a customer does leave, they'll remember how satisfied they were with us and won't know how satisfied they'll be with someone else. So we can say that competitive pressure in a sector depends on the barriers to entry that companies can erect. The more effective and numerous the barriers, the less the competitive pressure, and this gives company more freedom to set the price. Perfect competition occurs when the customer doesn't perceive any difference between the sellers of a product, making the customer indifferent to choose one supplier over another. In such a scenario, the only reason for choosing one supplier over another is the price. The only case I know of perfect competition is in the stock market, but only in markets where large quantities of shares aren't being moved and transaction involves a small amount, not controlling stakes. When a controlling stake is being offered, it's a very specific seller that is offering those stake, and it's not the same as buying a million tiny shares to build the package that a single seller could offer. So the logic differs slightly in this type of acquisitions. As we mentioned earlier, another factor impacting the level of competition or the competitiveness of a business is the nature and structure of costs. Some industries are more geared towards variable costs, while others lean towards fixed costs. Where there are many fixed costs, revenues are higher, but so is also the risk, because fixed costs mean that I have already invested and I'll recover that investment over time. I can exploit economies of scale, but the risk is greater. With higher risks, fewer companies are willing to enter the sector. A second factor capturing the competitive dimension is the rate of demand growth. Do you remember when we said that the bowl can grow, allowing new companies or new fish to enter, while the bowl itself increases in size, meaning the availability of food also grows? In this case, competitive pressure could actually even decrease. This relates to the demand growth rate and what we define as the life cycle of a sector. In the life cycle of a sector, there are various phases. When a sector is born, defined as a product category, when a new product arrives onto the market, think of artificial intelligence, which is a new product right now. Currently, there are only 2 or 3 providers of generative AI, or think of future entrants. Right now, there are only 2 main providers, Google and Meta or Luxottica. And so, when a product arrives to the market, few customers buy it because they don't yet know it. The most part of customers don't know the product yet. They need to become familiar with the innovation. Think about electric cars and how slowly they are penetrating the market. There are many potential customers who might be interested, but they are not buying the product yet. Is there room for many companies? No. We expect that in the beginning there are few companies. Initially, only the pioneer introduces the innovation. Then, the first imitators arrive. Over time, as companies imitate one another, they try to attract customers who, until then, haven't bought into that product category. This effort leads to the development of demand in the market. We say this continues up to a certain point, up to the point where the market saturates. In this slide, you can see that market B is close to saturation. If the market is the maximum sellable amount in the market is represented by the red circle and the blue circle represents the current market demand, you see that in case A, there's much to exploit, while in case B, there's very little to exploit. When there's little to exploit, companies only have the option of stealing customers from competitors in order to grow, and this increases the competitive pressure. I need to carefully monitor what my competitors are doing. In scenario A, there's plenty of room to engage entirely new customers in that product category. So if companies need to grow and more companies continue entering the market, they have 2 options. Either they can steal customers from competitors, or they can work to attract entirely new customers to the category. They push the latter option because stealing customers from competitors means risking, almost certainly provoking a competitor's reaction. This is something companies don't want to start, what's called a price war. How do you attract a competitor's customer? Typically by offering the same thing at a lower price or offering something better at a price that's not proportionally higher. So, you are giving something to the competitor's customer in order to get them to come to you. That is, through discount or through providing at the same price something that is better, you are offering the competitor's customer a reason to switch to you. The last reason competitive pressure may increase or decrease relates to the idea that the children feeding the fish can form special relationships with a specific fish. This ties into differentiation. We've said that companies can interact with customers in such a way that they create a special relationship. They can do this by creating barriers around the customer, which in the case become switching costs. However, once the customer is finally free, they are likely to leave, especially if the company has taken an opportunistic approach to the relationship. The best way to retain a customer is by satisfying them better than anyone else. It's clear that it's very difficult to satisfy all customers in a market better than your competitors. Think of the shampoo market. If I have to meet all customer expectations surrounding the shampoo, I'd have to sell products ranging from the most luxurious and effective, which are also the most expensive, to the cheapest bargaining shampoo. This is impossible to achieve, so companies focus on specific segments. Here we encounter the potential for differentiation. This focus is called differentiation, meaning that you choose a particular group of customers based on how profitable they are, how easy it is to reach out them, and how capable you are of creating a product specifically for them. Then you create an offer system tailored to them, striving to make it better than your competitors' offerings. This creates a sweet spot of customer relationship where you ensure a customer base willing to pay a slightly higher price for better satisfaction than the lowest price on the market would offer. Not all products can be differentiated. Consider salt, for example. It is very difficult to differentiate salt, or even sugar. How many sugar producers do you know? You probably know only 2 brands on the market. The products are very similar. For instance, Eridania has succeeded because it has occupied various niches in the market by offering many different types of sugar for various uses and tastes. What does this teach us? It teaches us that the potential for differentiation, the ability of a company to build a special relationship and do so effectively, depends on the nature of the product itself. Specifically, it depends on how many users and situations the product serves. Think about cars. The function of a car and the context in which it is used are very diverse. A car can be used for fun, for transporting objects, for carrying people, or for business activities like, for instance, the delivery. Each of these functions can be carried out in a urban setting or off-road, for instance, in a rural. This explains why there are so many different car models and so many companies, each specializing in a particular function or a particular situation. Think of Ferrari, which specializes in sports sedans, focusing on cars as pure entertainment, not for transporting objects or people, even though you can still drive from one place to another with a Ferrari. Or think of Smart, which focuses on urban use, making car design solely for city driving. In the case of sugar, if you think about it, sugar has only one function, but there are several different situations for its use. You might want to sweeten a hot drink, a cake, cookies, or a cocktail. In a cocktail, the sugar must dissolve completely, unless it is a mojito. In the case of dessert, you'd use powdered sugar or sugar that blends well. For drinks, it can be regular refined sugar crystals or brown sugar if you want to add a flavor. These are essentially the possibilities for differentiating sugar. So one function but several different situations of use. And this would determine how many companies could exist in that sector. Eridania, who was the producer who have decided to occupy the most part of segments that are functions in the market, was the first to exploit this understanding, achieving a near monopoly by differentiating the entire product line in the sugar industry.